Welcome to the Startup to Exit podcast, where we will bring you world-class entrepreneurs and VCs to share their hard-earned success stories and secrets. This podcast has been brought to you by TIE Seattle. TIE is a global nonprofit that focuses on fostering entrepreneurship. TIE Seattle offers a range of programs, including the Go Vertical Startup Creation Weekend, TIE Entrepreneur Institute, and the TIE Seattle Angel Network. We encourage you to become a TIE member so you can gain access to these great programs. To become a member, please visit www.seattle.tie.org.
Another episode of From Startup to Exit. Very exciting guest today on our generative AI series. Very important that we all understand our guest today, what they are doing to make this real, I should say. But first and foremost, my name is Gowri Shankar. Thank you all for subscribing and supporting our podcast. It's now available on every platform that podcasts are available. This podcast is brought to you by TIE Seattle, where we focus on fostering entrepreneurism. And my co-host, Shirish Nadkarni, a serial entrepreneur and a serial author. I'll get to his books in a minute. But TIE Seattle is being very instrumental in us getting to where we are as podcasters, both of us. So we thank them a lot. Shirish has written 2 books. The first book, From Startup to Exit, we took the title and shamelessly named our podcast the same. And his second book, Winner Take All, about marketplaces, is also published now. It's my honor to present this generative AI podcast, and I hand it over to Shirish to introduce our guest. Shirish.
Thank you, Gowri. So welcome, Jay and Rob. Great to have you on our program.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Happy to be here.
Great. So maybe we can start by having you guys tell us a little bit about yourselves. Jay, you want to get started?
Sure. I've known both Gowri and Shirish for a long time. I've been in the Seattle ecosystem for well over 3 decades. I started my career in Seattle as a PhD student at the University of Washington. Took my first AI class in the late 80s and was a researcher in the AI space in the early 90s, and then been both in and out of big and small companies, started a few and also worked at Microsoft, Amazon, and AOL along the way, as well as at Real Networks. More recently, I've been really interested in natural language modeling and how it applies to B2B applications. I've been involved in 3 different B2B ventures over the last 15 years or so that use natural language modeling or natural language processing and what you might call AI as part of their underlying technology. So really excited to be here. Been out of the for-profit world for about a year now, and I'm excited to be working with Rob on this venture.
Great, Rob.
Hi, thanks a lot, Shirish and Gowri, for having Jay and I. I've got quite a bit in common with Jay, and we've known each other for 15 or more years socially. Quick background, I'm an engineering major undergrad. I went into the Navy's nuclear power program. I was a submarine officer for 5 years on active duty after college, then went back to grad school. Went into enterprise sales for a couple of years in the late 90s, and then I've been a 4-time CEO since then, all of small to medium tech companies. I've co-founded one. I've been the number 2 at another. Companies I've run are kind of between 8 and 250 people. I've had ups and downs along the way. Ran one that I co-founded for 7 years and shut it down. It just didn't work. And twice third one, I was asked to come in from the board for a turnaround. I didn't get it all the way turned around, so I've shut down 2 of them, stood in front of 20 some odd employees each time and laid everybody off. So I've had some bumps along the way that probably many people listening to this podcast can relate to. The last one I ran for 8 years independently, was acquired by Mastercard. I helped integrate a Mastercard for 2 years. It was called Ekata. It was in identity verification and online fraud detection. Mastercard acquired that in mid-2021 for $850 million during the pandemic. And I've rolled off of my 2-year requirement last summer, and then Jay and I kind of started working on what has become Transparency Coalition.
Great. So thank you both. So can you tell us more about how you guys got started on the Transparency Coalition? How did the idea come about, and what made you decide to start it?
Jay, why don't you take the lead here?
Sure. So I think our main interest was actually in the rapidity and, from our perspective, recklessness with which generative AI was being rolled out. And so we were looking at kind of some of the early harms that people were starting to see, whether there be hallucinations or deep fakes. And we were trying to get to, and there are certainly a lot of efforts being made to regulate risk or regulate, outputs. But we realized that very quickly that inputs to the model, specifically training data, are a big piece of where all these harms are rooted. Certainly, confabulations or hallucinations, as they're sometimes known, as well as the ability to imitate people's likenesses in a deep and immersive fashion, are all rooted in how training data is ingested and used to train the models. So we are so that's kind of the motivation, since training data appears to be at the root of many of the issues that people are concerned about. Not all the issues, but many. And so we decided to focus on asking for increased transparency. So the idea here is that if you're a model developer, we would like to make sure that you are forced to empty your pockets about the sources of the training data you've used, as well as give people visibility into how you got that data. Was it public domain? Was it something that you obtained permission for? Was it your own, internally owned data? What were the data sources? How are they licensed? And that then also allows people to potentially ask that their data be removed or verify if their data is included. So that is kind of the genesis of our focus, is in this area of data transparency and training data transparency.
I understand that you guys literally had a fireside chat while you were camping when you came up with this idea and decided to work together. Is that right?
Rob, do you want to take that?
Yeah. No. Well, I had been stewing on this for a while, and Jay and I got to talking about it on an annual camping trip that we often participate on with our families, and Jay kind of shot me an email a week later and said, "Hey, let's sit down and talk about that some more." So. But yeah, I was concerned enough in maybe June of last summer to be kind of noodling on it quite a bit, and I got talking about it with Jay literally around a campfire one night, and a lot of topics come up, you might guess, but that was it. I'll add a little bit more to sort of Jay's context. One is, we are taking an approach that these technologies that touch so much of our lives need to have some guardrails and regulation in place. And, I've got 3 kids that are, 18, 20, and 22. I think anybody that's had kids in the last 15 years, this notion that elected officials and policymakers should sort of sit on their hands and hope it goes well, that experiment with social media failed, in my opinion. And we got 41 attorneys general suing Meta right now. It's hard to get 41 attorneys general to agree on anything in this country right now, but boy, somehow Mark Zuckerberg and Meta did it. So, testimony in Congress and many other things that all the listeners out here know about. So we feel like that there needs to be policy in place Many of you all, I was in payments for a while. That was what, the broad ecosystem that Ekata, the company I ran for, that Mastercard acquired, operated in. Financial services touches a lot of our lives in many ways, and it's regulated. Why? Because there's a lot of people that'll do bad things and without regulation, and some people commit a lot of fraud and need to go to jail. And there's so much less regulation in tech relative to financial services, but it's touching our lives in many ways more than financial services. So just as a sort of broad approach there. Then the last thing I'll say is we decided to take a state-focused approach, not a federal approach. The states tend to move faster. They iterate more, and especially California, but other states as well, they trade notes. And once one state passes something, oftentimes a number of other state legislatures in the next session can kind of do a copy-paste. And whether it's the mileage standards that were stricter than the EPA that California put in place 25 years ago, or more recently the California Consumer Protection Act, we now have 17 states with some level of Privacy Act, many modeled initially off of the California Consumer Protection Act. So we've focused first and foremost on states, Washington, where we reside, and in California in the 2024 legislative session, we are focused on getting to 8 or 9 states in 2025, with both a mix of red and blue states involved, because it's a bipartisan issue.
That's interesting. So you think that at the federal level, they are not moving as quickly? Because it's a pain for companies, in having done startups myself, like you guys. It's a pain to track regulation in different states and ensure that you're compatible with all of those requirements. Why not pursue regulation at a federal level?
I'll take a first pass here, Jay, and then you can add on. A couple things. One is we actually have more organically, and especially based on some relationships Jay's built, we've probably briefed 25 federal staffers, congressional staffers at this point, most of them in the Senate, a few of them in the House. And there is some bipartisan work. There's sort of 2 things in DC right now from our ear to the ground there that are getting bipartisan attention. One is just China broadly, and the second is AI. That said, as we all know, there's a lot of dysfunction in Washington, and it's really challenging to get things done. There is an AI bill that's been unveiled that's got some bipartisan support in the Senate. It's very much of a kind of first step, put in place some tracking and some standards and metrics development and so forth. Type of bill, as opposed to a lot of regulation and enforcement. Even that may be difficult to get across the line. For the first time, there's a bipartisan privacy bill, the American Privacy Rights Act, that has maybe a chance. But one of the things that the states do, one of the reasons the APRA, or the American Privacy Rights Act, is getting a push right now is exactly what you said, Shirish, which is if enough states, if 8 or 10 states put in place laws, even the industry would rather have a federal standard than a patchwork of state laws. So the states making movement on things in the shorter term puts kind of back pressure on the U.S. Congress to do something. So that's kind of part of the thought process here.
Got it. And I guess California is leader in these kinds of legislations, and a lot of states follow the lead of California.
Yeah,
is that correct?
I think one of the things that's interesting about California, which we is just the difference in the legislative sessions, how long they last, how well staffed their state legislative aides are. Like, for example, in Washington, we had a 2.5-month legislative session. Most legislators only have 1 staffer, whereas in California, typically people have multiple staffers who have tenure and who are well qualified to partner with their legislators, and so we end up they're able to take a more substantive look at things. In our experience, many of the California-based legislators also have a tech background. They're former entrepreneurs or entrepreneurs, or connected by family to entrepreneurs, and so they have more than a surface understanding of the issues. So that's something that's also super helpful.
Got it. Okay. So let's talk about where all these models are getting their data. Can you talk a little bit more about what has been disclosed so far by like Facebook or OpenAI? Where are they getting their data from? Are they in the case of OpenAI, are they primarily scraping the web, and Facebook they're taking user data? What can you tell us more about where the data is coming from?
I think the one thing that most, if not all, commercial models do is Facebook is a little bit different, at least partially, but particularly OpenAI and others generally take the view that if it's publicly available, it can be ingested for AI training. And that's of course a very broad tent, because if someone were to take your personal data and without your permission put it up on a website, you might not have a say on it, but they would say, oh, well, it's publicly available, so I can ingest it. So there's sort of multiple sources of content that people have proven exists, have been, mostly it's not been driven by disclosure by the model developers, more by researchers finding the content, or in some cases, copyright owners being able to prove that their content was ingested. So it's either publicly available web data, which includes, by the way, images, video, personal, potentially also includes personal information, content from pretty much any website you can think of. It includes, more recently we found out, scraped YouTube video and the audio from YouTube videos. It includes books. So there's databases that are originally created for research purposes. For example, in the copyright law, if you're doing research on, for example, natural language models, and you wanted an access to a large corpus of natural language data, it would be legal for you to scan a bunch of books and do that work, right? But if you're trying to build a commercial product, that is obviously potentially not kosher. It's being decided in the courts, or potentially with a future revision of the law. But at the moment, the practice of taking copyrighted content such as books in is also problematic. So it's personal information, web information of all sorts, image, video, and copyrighted content, including books. And then the New York Times was able to show evidence of people circumventing paywalls to go download content. So it's so there's definitely quite a lot of quite a few data collection practices. Now, if you happen to have the world's largest social graph, which one of the model developers does, you also then have access to that information, right? You have access to your connections, their habits, other information that you may post on social media, and so that information is also being ingested into models. In the case of Meta, they have kind of a twofold approach. They have an internal model that's based on an open source platform. They do not, however, make the model weight or training data open source. All the information about the commercially deployed version of Meta's AI is its own. They deploy the model source code, but not the model weights or the training data.
Got it. And does Facebook in their privacy policy or terms of service, do they explicitly ask for permission to use my posts and all that to train their AI? Is there provision? Have you looked at what exactly they ask for permission?
So they do not ask. My general observation has been, and this has been by studying like iterations of privacy policy, right? From not just Facebook, but also from Google and others. The general approach is revise the privacy policy quietly, without notifying people. Or they will notify you of a change, and typically the change will be such that it allows them to use data for purposes other than what you gave it to them for to begin with. And so like the APRA, for example, includes a very important provision called data minimization, where they are asking that if you collect data for X purpose, you should only use it for X purpose. You can't now start saying, "Oh, sorry, I changed my mind. I'm going to use it for AI training as well." So that's an example of something that is not that is permissible because it's not outlawed, but certainly doesn't meet the spirit of what you and I thought of when we signed up for Facebook accounts. So,
Right. Got it.
Yeah, I'll just add just a couple of additional elements here. A recent article indicated that, and Business Insider indicated that there's an Authors Guild lawsuit against OpenAI. OpenAI destroyed two large training sets, basically destroyed evidence. One was called Books 2 and one was called Books 3, with hundreds of thousands of copyrighted books in them. Just recently, it was reported that the report I read was in Microsoft was the New York Times, that OpenAI at their COO level or the president level launched a audio to text converter for all YouTube videos to feed into their model against YouTube's terms of service. Google decided not to prosecute it because they decided they wanted to violate their own terms of service to use in their training models. You can't make this up, So anybody who's ever posted a YouTube video who thought that they were doing it for their own benefit, whether it was copyrighted or their own content or their own creativity or whatever, it's gone. It's being loaded into models now. So this is the type of thing that's going on. The other thing that's important is, we used to spend a lot of time on what's called personally identifiable information, which, Gowri, is your name, address, phone, email type of things. That's about 1% or a fraction of 1% of what we're talking about in personal information right now, because if you use Google Maps knows everywhere you've been every 6 minutes. If you are getting cancer treatments and go to a cancer center, Google knows that it's being loaded into an AI model. That is not protected under HIPAA. HIPAA is for hospitals and healthcare organizations. They're constrained on providing your healthcare data. But if you went to a mental institution for depression or whatever, or you're visiting your kids there, Google Maps knows. And you combine that with your who your friends are on a social media app, or your contacts, where you sleep at night, which is where a lot of your 6 minutes are spent that are being tracked. There's no anonymization. Very quickly, it's Gowri, and all of your health information is available, and so on and so forth. So these are pretty problematic things relative to what anybody intended them to be used for. And very little of the public knows it. Our broad focus is, if you're using someone's copyright or IP, you should license it. And I've got a lot of experience running businesses that license content and IP. Jay is an adjunct professor at the University of Washington. You go up the street from the electrical engineering department where he works to the law school, there are tomes of books on copyright and IP. There's 150 years of business history there. Somehow it doesn't apply to Sam Altman. That's absurd. That's a joke. So,
but in some respects, isn't the cat out of the bag in that, OpenAI and Facebook and others have already trained their models, spending literally tens of millions of hundreds of millions of dollars to do that? Are they really going to
I think one of the things to remember,
retrain their models?
I think one of the things to remember is that when people say, "Oh, I've already trained my model," that's smells like some particular type of BS to me. Because the reality is, every time you improve your model, you train it from scratch, right? You cannot build a new model. So every time they say, "I'm working on ChatGPT 4.0 or ChatGPT 4.5, they have to start training from scratch. So every time the architecture is changed drastically, whether it's the context window, which is the number of words it analyzes, or the parameter weight or the other changes, some fundamental changes that happen, they have to take the data that they have and process it again. So so they definitely have the opportunity to pay attention to it. Now the cat may be out of the bag in terms of like um, inflated expectations that they may have passed on to the street, but it's not. It's definitely not out of the bag. And in fact, I think yesterday the CEO of the Allen Institute of AI was quoted as saying that that's the biggest issue with AI is the speed at which it is just being rolled out without proper considerations on safety and reliability. So I think there's this whole mad rush. If you thought your children or my children were worried about FOMO, wait till you meet the CEOs of these big four companies. That they are FOMO is the biggest thing that's driving it. Nobody wants to be second. So inflated promises are made to about product expectations, and consumer safety and privacy be damned in the process. That's something that is certainly a result of this rush to market. So I think because it's being rushed to market, you see frequent reports of issues. For example, when Google rolled out and then rolled back, AI in search, that was an example of something where the technology is not as reliable as people make it out to be, right? And so even for a company the scale of Google with the amount of expertise it has, to be able to put something like that I have a professor I sometimes collaborate with at the University of Washington. Her name is Emily Bender, and what she calls them are stochastic parrots. It's like a parrot you've trained, except you don't know what it's going to do, whether it's going to swear at you or it's going to say, I love you. You have no idea, right? And so I think it just depends on the mood of the parrot. And so you could ask the parrot the same thing, and it'll say a different thing every time. And to some extent, these models you do behave in that fashion, So that's something that is something that you just have to keep in mind when you're thinking about this technology, thinking about how you roll it out, and thinking about how to use the technology as it is today,
Right.
So.
All right, over to you, Gowri.
Hey, thanks, Shirish. First of all, I want you two gentlemen to be honest and tell me the libation and edibles you had at that camp. Because there's something.
We might have had a beer or two, Gowri.
It's all blame it on the hops. Blame it on the hops. Not IPA.
So coming out of that. So here you are. You went on a camping trip and then woke up and said, let's solve world hunger. Nah, that's too small. Yeah, I did. Go for it. First, congrats on the launch. And why did you set it up as a not-for-profit as opposed to a lobbyist who are all profitable? I mean, what's the thesis behind the not-for-profit approach?
Yeah, let me take that one, and then Jay can add in. First of all, after I was wrapping up this sort of 2-year hitch at Mastercard, I just decided I'd been a CEO 4 times. You never say never, but I really wasn't looking to get involved in another for-profit organization. I was really looking to try and give something back somehow, and I believe in service, and I'd done that early in my career in the Navy, and this just sort of came up. But what specifically came up in this in the way we formed it was I initially looked for a board to join or someplace to help. I've got enough knowledge. We did a lot of machine learning, which is kind of 80%. I think all your listeners know 80% of what's actually deployed out there today is really machine learning AI, right? Predictive AI based on scores and so forth. I had enough knowledge to think about what's going on, and I looked around to help, and the challenge becomes very quickly Jay and I now think about it as an AI policy marketplace, because all your listeners understand markets, and there's always a demand and a supply side of the market. So if you think about it, a demand and supply side of the AI policy market, there's a lot of demand out there. There's copyright holders and IP holders. There's parents. There's a bunch of research organizations. Jay mentioned Emily Bender. He participates in the RAISE at UW, which is Responsible AI Systems Engineering. There's one at Stanford. There's one at Cal. There's one at Columbia. There's labor as a part of the demand side. A lot of different organizations, people writing op-eds and so forth that are concerned. On the supply side, actually supplying AI policy or enforcing it, there is incredibly constrained time problems there. Most legislators, as Jay said, 40 out of our 50 state legislatures, you've got a elected official with one staffer who's basically a scheduler. They don't have time to chase, and they are dealing with a really wide range of issues. Jay and I are down, meeting with people in Olympia here in Washington's capital, and they deal with really tangible issues that people that run into every day, and they don't have time to spend a huge amount of effort on a fast-moving target like AI. And so in between the demand and supply side, there is this real gap of basic education of policymakers, whether they're staffers and elected officials, or whether they're attorneys general, or agency officials or so forth. Just basic education of what AI is, how it works, what the inputs are. And that's a one-on-one or one-on-a-couple people type of interaction, whether it's on Zoom or whether it's in person. You can't do it through Facebook posts or buying Google AdWords. And then the second thing is there's a real effort toward, there's a real need for actual language that can go into bills. And so, we're supporting a couple of different bills down in California right now. Jay's probably going to testify here shortly. Half of language in one of the bills we're supporting is really Jay's language. And we've refined that over time, but we have time to focus on it. Most of the state legislatures do not. And so we started a nonprofit, and we actually started what's called a 501c4, which I didn't even know the difference, but a public charity is a 501c3, and you get a tax write-off to donate to it. A 501c4 has capability and flexibility to lobby, but there's no tax write-off. We now actually have a 501c4 and a 501c3 operating in parallel, because our educational activities, our marketing activities, if you look at our website at transparencycoalition.ai, we have our own staff writers. We're trying to provide as well as call attention to certain publications and articles. We're writing some of our own. All of that can be 501c3 focused work, but our actual involvement in state with state legislative folks and lobbyists or consultants in various states, that's a 501c4 activity. So that's where the nonprofit kind of came from, and what we're trying to get done that we saw as a gap in the market.
I think just to add to that, I think it also, because typically anybody with any sort of engineering experience or product experience that talks to them is trying to sell something, right? And so the fact that we are a nonprofit, that we are not corporate funded, that we are not doing the work for hire, usually improves our reception. So we get meetings, and as when I was a startup CEO, I would have killed for the kind of how easy it is to get meetings sometimes for us, or easier than I would expect, right? Because people are really hungry for impartial or just no BS advice on this topic, and so that is certainly improves our effectiveness. Whereas if we were seen as repping someone's specific agenda, would not be the case. So.
Yeah, let me ask and mention one more thing with relation to your question, Gowri. We do think there is a place for for-profit organizations in what we're trying to get done, namely platforms that manage training data and make it audit capable. Jay and I have operated in environments where SOC 2 is a requirement for cybersecurity. We believe that there will be some kind of third-party audit mechanism that people and companies will want to have done to sort of verify the efficacy of the training data, and also that it was obtained in a legal manner. And so those are the types of things where we see a for-profit opportunity. And Jay spent some of his early years in music streaming and digital rights management, and I think there's a big opportunity for that here, and hopefully some of your listeners are working on something there.
Got it. So, what have you guys set up as, since you're going state by state, there's going to be different speeds at which it operates. Every jurisdiction operates differently. Obviously now, the pace at which, Jay, you referred to the rollout, it affects the entire 7 billion plus people, humanity, right? You can go to any country, any state, anywhere in the world, there's some AI implications. How, even as sophisticated as California could be, but this could be a more acute problem elsewhere. Have there been overtures from other jurisdictions that are not U.S. states to help them write essentially the AI constitution, if I look at it that way? I mean, because they have the ability to do things that may otherwise not be possible because cat is out of the bag in the U.S.
No, I think we pay attention, especially on the research front, the policy research front, to other like-minded organizations, especially in Europe, where there's a lot of this thinking happening. We work with some organizations. There's an organization called the Future of Privacy Forum, which is active globally, for example. And so our given, I think may have been you that told me this once, Gowri, but more startups die of overeating than starvation. So I think even nonprofits are not immune from that, immune to that. So we have to be really focused to demonstrate impact, to make sure that our donors feel like they're getting their money's worth. And then where we can't do things ourselves, we have to either influence or partner, right? And so I think that's kind of our approach, is influence. LinkedIn is a powerful platform, and honestly, to influence other people's thinking, because you can do it without actively engaging with them. So that's why we do a lot of content, produce content, reflect other people's content. So we are seen as a productive voice in this ecosystem, and through our link ups, either informal or formal, with other organizations. At least at this stage, that's how we expect to have influence for more globally. I think within the United States, the state-by-state strategy and federal is kind of how we expect things to roll out. Won't happen overnight, so we do think that despite the I do expect that this will be a 2 to 3 year process of actually producing the right regulations and then figuring out a way to enforce them in a way that works for industry and works for humanity.
Right. So obviously, patience is more than a virtue when you deal with the government, right? Because it's going to be change of administration, change of the flavor of the day, whatever the case may be. In some cases, let me take a specific example, right? Say in drug discovery, I think AI has a extremely significant role compared to, say, that I can write poetry as good as the best poet. I don't want to. But,
yes.
Yeah. So how do you through your education arm, how do you help so that it's not a one size fits all? Hey, all training data is bad. Because if some researcher partnering with, say, one of the large language models able to cure cancer, or a group of them are able to cure cancer, it's worth the trouble because they do have the data. So how are you guys separating the do-good AI with something that the AI can be disastrous? How do you see it?
I think the verticalization of AI, or the taking the what some people call small language models, or models that are more modular and focused on specific applications. Fundamentally, they don't need the ability to summarize Shakespeare and the ability to analyze, protein chemistry. Right? Both those capabilities don't need to exist in the same model. So if you build a model that's purpose-built for this space, I'm also a mentor at CoMotion, and one of the things I'm exposed to frequently is AI startups from the Institute of Protein Design, right? And so these are, using the similar or same technology. In some cases, they're using predictive AI. In some cases, they're using generative AI. But they understand that the training data, in their case, they're focused on synthetic training data. They can't crawl the web to go look for protein chemistry, right? So they have to figure out how to generate potential layouts, and they do that using synthetic data, and then they apply that to try to do the drug discovery problem you're talking about. I mean, I think it's still an open research topic, the use of generative AI in this space, but predictive AI is a much more well understood space, and there's lots of highly successful companies that have already been created potentially using AI even in the drug discovery place. There have been companies in Seattle that were built even starting in the late 90s that did use predictive AI in some aspects of drug discovery. So it's not a one size fits all solution. There's despite the fact that the same brand has been. I'm sure I've pitched a few to you, Gowri, things, or Shirish, where I said, "Oh, this is AI," and what I meant was something very different. Over the last 15, 20 years. So that I think is part of what's happening, is a confusion about what flavor of AI people are using, and how there are very beneficial and productive uses of AI that are already being developed, even including using the underpinnings of generative AI, but not using the same fell off a truck approach to acquiring training data. So,
and Gowri, just to add on this a little bit, this is really what we're advocating for, which is, in a real simple way, we're focused on training data and transparency around. Think of it as a nutrition label, like you'd see in a cereal box.
Mm-hmm.
Is there personal information going into your model? Is there copyright information? Do you have a license to it? We're not trying to take any trade secrets, as I think most of your listeners know. The trade secrets are in processing the training data and curating it and so forth. Much more than a high level. Do you own it, or have you licensed it? Is personal information going in there? What are your broad sources? All of these big players have announced a few of their licensing deals. Well, okay, so they can't say that they don't want to tell anybody about all of their sources are trade secrets, because they've announced a number of these publicly, whether it's Reddit or so on. But the advantage of publishing what training data, broad strokes around your training data is, number one, you got to think hard if you want personal information in there, or you should be curating it out, because you might be facing some lawsuits if you don't, right? Secondly, if training data is licensed and has a real cost, then what you get is organizations that are focused on small models and specific problems, like being super accurate on detecting stage 4 pancreatic cancer, which is the type of thing we want AI to do well. And you don't need to be able to write a Shakespeare play to do that. And so just as an example, the company I ran focused on detecting fraud on a global basis. And when we were acquired that year, we had mid 60s of revenue, mid 60 million, 67, 68 million of revenue. And we had $11 million of data licensing costs. So besides headcount, data licensing, IP licensing was by far the biggest part of our cost structure, way more than AWS processing costs, 5x more and 10x, 7x more than AWS processing. So most companies that operate in AI license and curate heavily their training data, and And the other benefit of curation and sort of realistic amounts of training data is you can actually correlate when you've got a problem in the output, you can link it back to the inputs. And in my business, every time our scores were skewed off in Southeast Asia or in Europe, it was because we didn't have as good of a training data set there as we had in the US around fraud. So we went and worked with customers in those areas. When you suck in everything on the internet and that model hallucinates in a chat room and tells someone to commit suicide, and they do, which has happened, and OpenAI says that's a hallucination. That's not a hallucination. It's a lack of accountability and loss of control of your training data, pure and simple. And there's no excuse for it, honestly. And so that's why we're focused on transparency around training data, because it begins to narrow focus if you have some constraints around not sucking in everything that's ever been digitized to answer, create the cyborg deity, basically.
Got it. So, Rob, that's interesting what you just said, right? All these organizations, I mean, they're very, very large companies, are very used to licensing everything. I mean, they have
for sure
floor full of lawyers just doing this, right? What happened that one morning they said, right, it's okay to just suck it all in? Is it the FOMO, or did they see the rewards being so high that it was okay to pay the penalty later? Or what changed in the mindset? Because for most part, I don't think any of these organizations or any of these entrepreneurs woke up one morning and said, we violate everything. That they till yesterday did it.
Yeah, so I don't know what the thinking was, but I can tell you what's been documented. Number one is, at some point, OpenAI just decided they were going to take a shortcut. And as Jay mentioned, the CEO of the Allen Institute yesterday said, the big tech AI is quickly losing the public's trust because they're not telling anybody what they're taking in their training data. And that decision was made in for 2-ish years. It was kind of under the hat because no one knew what was going on. And there's all sorts of crawlers out there to index data for search. So who knows if there's a crawler on your website or on your book or digitized item to suck in for training data until, ChatGPT 3.0 or 3.5 or whatever it was went live and people started seeing the output in a very tangible way. So, there were 2 to 3 years of no one knowing what was going on, really. And then what you've got is, documented articles on internal discussions at Meta saying, well, we're going to violate copyright laws, but OpenAI is already doing it. So it's industry standard. Let's just follow. And it's not, I don't think it's right. If you wrote a book, Shirish, you're an author, I don't necessarily think that you like your book indexed for search. I don't think that necessarily means you want it reverse engineered so someone can write a book under your name sometime with 80% of the same content, call it their own. And so that's I think what's going on. And I'm extrapolating with a few data points, not any. Jay and I don't have time to go research this. We're trying to look forward looking.
So what is the? Go ahead, Jay.
There are whistleblowers complaints that like this surfaced even just yesterday on kind of practices at various companies. So definitely there's people digging into it, and there's people of good conscience working in all these companies that don't like what's going on. But the profit motive sometimes drowns everything out.
So that opens up this whole can of worms, right? Are whistleblowers protected? I mean, there were 2 whistleblowers at Boeing. They were not even in the AI business. Right? I mean, these are extremely, extremely powerful organizations today, right? I mean, let's not sort of pretend OpenAI is a startup, right? It's a Microsoft thing. Right, they're the biggest investor.
It's a Microsoft company for all intents and purposes. Yeah.
Anthropic is an AWS company, and so on and so forth. DeepMind is a Google company. So, do whistleblowers? I mean, especially Transparency Coalition, I think, can benefit from whistleblowers saying they are not or they are. therefore your education can be why they should, meaning legislated. Is there a way for whistleblowers to be confident that they will be protected, quote unquote, from?
We're not obviously experts in that statute or anything of that sort, but luckily for us, there are people with consciences around. The former VP of Stability AI, a gentleman named Ed Newton Rex that we've met with several times. He quit his job because he didn't agree with the practices of data ingestion in his company, and so there someone at Microsoft, Shane Jones, he came out and against some of the stuff. So there are brave people that we all should eventually we will all have to thank them for their service to humanity. But I think the important thing for us is that we're not the stuff we talk about is grounded in our understanding of the problem. We surface them. These other messages, which may come at some human cost to the people that are speaking up, are usually reinforcing our messages. And of course, recently there was also talk about clawback agreements at OpenAI, for example, where they could claw back equity from people who spoke out against the company. So so there's every tool in the book is being used to keep people quiet. Obviously, we're all familiar with golden handcuffs. We love them when we have them, but at the same time, I think that there are some things that might be too important to
and it's important that you mentioned the golden handcuffs, right? Let's just take NVIDIA as an example, the least controversial of the lot at the moment. I'm not saying that, right? So they moved from $2 trillion in February total market value to $3 trillion sometime now. We're recording this in June of 2024. So is the reward? I mean, that's like swallowing up the bottom 100 countries, right? They could write cash and just buy the bottom 100 countries of the in the world. Is the reward so unprecedented for the few? It's not like everybody's enjoying, right? Salesforce took a beating because they didn't have enough AI, while NVIDIA is rewarded disproportionately. The few are being rewarded so disproportionately that will we able to actually ever know what goes on inside these major models? Because the golden handcuffs, I've not even imagined yet what my reward would be. When you move $1 trillion in a few months, is that even imaginable by just average humans? Or even extraordinary humans.
I think, it's our goal is to look out for 99.9% of American citizens that aren't part of that. And they're really not represented at all. I don't know about NVIDIA at all, but I don't believe that Facebook or Google cares a minute about 99.9% of the population, not for a second. They care about themselves, and so, but that's where elected officials and policymakers step in. And there's precedent for this in the United States, and the reason antitrust laws exist is because in the 1870s and 1880s and 1890s, the railroads literally owned everything. And I've read enough books, there wasn't a judge that wasn't owned in the West by Union Pacific. There wasn't an elected official that wasn't owned, bought, and paid for. The whole reason there are ballot initiatives in the Western U.S. is because it was the only way to get around Union Pacific's stranglehold on every legislature and every judge. We also believe that the general population understands that big tech really doesn't care about them at all, and it's hard for them to know how to fight back against that. So the last thing I will say, though, is one of the things that our policy focus is around is maintaining innovation in entrepreneurs, and your listeners should know that, because right now, if Jay and I started a company and found something really interesting to do in AI, it would necessarily require training data. And the way it goes right now, if we created something that looked like it had a good market, we would never get acquired. Our training data would be stolen, because there is no downside right now. I'm not joking, Gowri, you're laughing, but like literally OpenAI or Google or Meta would take our training data. And there is nothing we could do about it, because there's no downside right now. They're taking anything that's digitized behind paywalls, you name it. And so, an entrepreneur literally is just going to be run over and run out of business if they come up with a good idea in AI that has any type of large market usage right now, without transparency around training data and ownership and IP licensing requirements for training data.
So obviously you touched on one thing, Rob, which is 99% of the citizens care and want responsible AI, right? There's no question about it. So what can the average citizen do? I mean, you are educating legislators. Obviously, the average citizen votes the legislators in, or does other things that that will influence a legislator. Could you share how can they find information about the activities you're doing, and how could they participate in any activity that could help you guys?
Yeah. So number one, we have a website. It is our focus is direct work with policymakers and broadly, a little bit more broadly stated, stakeholders in the society, whether they're educators or business executives outside of tech that have a lot to lose potentially. Anybody who's in the publishing business, broadly stated, whether it's written or musical or video, all of those types of folks. That's what we're focused on. So we aren't trying to take a broad citizen approach. We do. There's the Center for Humane Technology that put on kind of we're working shoulder to shoulder with them. They've got a much longer history, but they put out The Social Dilemma on Netflix that I think many folks saw. That they have more of a focus on citizen activation. But number one, citizens all should know a little bit more about their own privacy and how to protect it, opt out as much as possible on what's going on their phone and so forth. Number two, though, is like anything in this country and in democracy, write your elected officials at the municipal, at the state, at the federal level, and make your voice heard, because it's important, whether you're a parent or whether you're a copyright holder or whether you're just a concerned citizen, which Jay and I are. Those are some of the ways in our size and footprint right now. We would love to have more active ways to get involved. We're not far enough along. We only stood this up in October last year.
Thank you. So, Rob and Jay, it's been fascinating. This is, I think we may have to have you guys back, because once you have the first legislation through, we are still in the beginning stages of your journey. So we got to have you as a featured guest periodically, so you can continue to train our own listeners on what to look for. Thank you for your time, and Shirish, for back to you.
Great. Thank you, Rob and Jay. This was a fascinating conversation, and we wish you all the best in your legislative efforts, and look forward to hearing back from you at some future point.
Wonderful.
Been a pleasure. Thank you both.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yep.
Cheers.
Thank you for listening to our podcast from Startup to Exit, brought to you by TIE Seattle. Assisting in production today are Isha Jain and Mini Verma. Please subscribe to our podcast and rate our podcast wherever you listen to them. Hope you enjoyed it.